The air in Conference Room 7 was a toxic blend of stale coffee, cold pizza, and escalating dread. A giant holographic display pulsed in angry crimson, the words "system failure, critical," blinking with relentless urgency across its immense surface. Below it, smaller screens flickered with a bewildering array of plummeting user counts, soaring latency reports, and ominously flat revenue graphs. Mr. Henderson, CEO of Luminatech, a man whose patience was as thin as his bespoke suits, slammed his fist onto the polished chrome table, the sound echoing unnervingly in the suddenly quiet room.
Report, now. What in God's name is happening to our Q3 launch? Are we bleeding cash or just users? Someone tell me. Sarah, head of product, visibly flinched.
Her usually immaculate bob was slightly askew, a testament to the last 8 hours of frantic damage control. Her voice, usually composed, wavered slightly.
Sir, we believe it's a server overload, unprecedented traffic volume. Our models simply didn't predict this scale of user engagement post-launch.
It's a good problem, in a way, she trailed off, realizing the absurdity of calling a multi-million-dollar crisis a good problem. Henderson cut her off, his voice a low growl that vibrated with contained fury. Good problem? Sarah, our share price just took a 7-point nosedive. A good problem is one that makes us more money, not less. Mark, what's your team doing? Mark, the engineering lead, a man whose domain was lines of code and logical flows, ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, his glasses perched precariously on his nose. He launched into a rapid-fire explanation, a torrent of technical jargon about database sharding, API throttling, and load balancing protocols. He spoke with the speed of a man trying to outrun a coming storm, his words a dense fog designed more to impress with complexity and confidence than to clarify the issue. The room, filled with stressed executives, nodded along, pretending to understand the intricate dance of bytes and servers, their faces reflecting the unspoken conviction that if someone spoke fast enough and with enough technical authority, the problem would simply vanish. At the far end of the table, almost an afterthought in the high-stakes drama unfolding, sat Anya. A junior data analyst, her presence in this high-level crisis meeting was unusual, a last-minute addition to provide granular data insights, as Henderson had vaguely decreed hours ago. While others leaned forward, gripped by the urgency, their postures tense, Anya sat back, her hands loosely clasped in her lap, her posture relaxed, almost deceptively so. Her gaze, however, was anything but relaxed. It drifted from the flashing metrics on the main display to the subtle flicker of a less prominent data stream tucked away in a corner, then back to the shifting expressions of her colleagues. She wasn't speaking, wasn't fidgeting, wasn't even taking notes in the frantic way others were. She was simply observing, absorbing, mapping the room. She noticed the way Sarah's jaw tightened whenever Henderson spoke, how Mark avoided eye contact, and the subtle hierarchy of influence at play, who held sway, who sought approval, who avoided conflict at all costs. The chaos was loud, but Anya was listening to the quiet, unseen currents beneath it. An hour crawled by. Mark's team pushed an emergency patch. The system metrics flickered with hopeful green, then settled back into their angry red. The crimson glow on the main screen seemed to deepen. "No change!" Henderson roared, the veins on his neck prominent, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and panic. "We're hemorrhaging users. What about diverting traffic, cloudburst solutions, anything to stop the bleeding?" Sarah, desperate to contribute something, anything, offered, "We could geofence certain regions temporarily, buy us some time to scale up back-end infrastructure." "It'll upset some users, but it's better than total collapse. It's a drastic measure, but it gives us breathing room." Her words were laced with an urgency that bordered on desperation, her eyes darting between Henderson and Mark, seeking validation. Anya's voice, when it finally came, was so soft it was almost lost beneath the humming servers and the low murmur of exasperated sighs. "Excuse me, mister?" "Henderson," she began, her eyes still on the smaller, less dramatic data stream, a flicker of something in her gaze that wasn't panic, but focused curiosity. "But why are we assuming this is solely a server overload?" The room went silent. Not with understanding, but with collective incredulity. Henderson turned slowly, his gaze like a laser, dissecting Anya's calm demeanor. "Anya, are you questioning Mark's assessment?"
The metrics are clear. 98% CPU utilization, database queues backed up. That's overload, pure and simple. It's textbook. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, a don't make waves look on her face, silently urging Anya to recant. Mark, bruised by the failure of his emergency patch, shot Anya a glare of irritation. "With all due respect, Anya, what else could it be? The numbers don't lie. Our infrastructure is collapsing under demand." His tone was defensive, a subtle challenge to her expertise. For many, being wrong felt like a personal attack, a threat to their identity and status, so they defended their initial assessment even when the evidence was shifting. Anya met their gazes without flinching. Her voice remained even, steady, like a quiet stream flowing through a rocky landscape. She didn't rush to fill the uncomfortable silence that followed her question, allowing the space to breathe, for her words to settle, and for others to reveal more of their underlying assumptions. "Our models show a predicted peak traffic of 1.2 million concurrent users for this launch. Correct?" She paused again, inviting confirmation, not confrontation. "And our current system capacity, even under stress, should theoretically handle up to 1.5 million. The current user count showing on the main display, even at its peak, hasn't exceeded 950,000. So we're failing under less than predicted load, and significantly less than theoretical capacity." Her words were simple, factual, devoid of accusation. She wasn't arguing to win, but to locate accuracy. She gestured subtly towards the smaller data stream she'd been watching, a stream everyone else had dismissed as peripheral noise. And that smaller feed, showing user behavior analytics, it's not just showing failed logins or slow responses across the board. It's showing a consistent pattern of users getting stuck at a very specific point, the user profile creation page. Repeated attempts, then immediate logouts. It's a high churn rate before they even fully engage with the core product, not after. She saw the micro expressions on Sarah's face, the tightening jaw, the darting eyes, revealing a deep fear of failure, her mind already racing to find a counterargument. She registered Henderson's shifting weight, a telltale sign of his growing frustration, his preference for action over introspection. And Mark, his rapid-fire explanations were a defense mechanism, a shield of complexity against vulnerability. Anya saw the patterns in their behavior, the emotional triggers, the status games playing out in the tense room. Mark scoffed, shaking his head. "That's normal. People drop off. It's user friction, not a system failure. We anticipate a certain percentage won't complete onboarding." "But it's a new pattern," Anya countered gently, her voice gaining a quiet but firm edge, "and a new pattern for this specific product." Previous launches showed a smoother onboarding funnel. Also, notice the time of day these drop-offs are peaking. It correlates less with global traffic surges and more with certain regional time zones coming online, specifically Southeast Asia. She allowed the silence to deepen, letting her observations sink in. Sarah, despite her initial defensiveness, looked at the smaller feed Anya indicated. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, a fleeting moment where her pride momentarily gave way to curiosity. "You're saying it might not be the servers?" She turned to Mark, almost seeking his permission to consider this new angle. Henderson, however, was already impatient. "So what, Anya? A bottleneck on one page?" "That still points to a server issue or bad code on that module. We need a solution, not an academic debate. We're losing money by the second."
What if the problem we're actually solving, Anya continued, ignoring the dismissal, her voice unwavering, isn't about scaling up, but about a flaw in the user experience that's triggering an artificial load spike?
If users are repeatedly trying to complete a broken process, perhaps a language setting error or an unexpected character limit in a profile field, they're hammering the same resources again and again, creating the illusion of overwhelming organic traffic.
She paused, her gaze sweeping across the tense faces, her composure a stark contrast to the panic around her. Why do we assume the traffic is real demand rather than failed attempts? The question hung in the air, deceptively simple, yet utterly disarming. It challenged the fundamental assumption that had driven all their frantic efforts. The room was thick with unspoken questions and a fair bit of open skepticism. Mark looked utterly bewildered, his technical brain struggling to reconcile Anya's simple idea with his complex problem. Henderson tapped his fingers on the table, his impatience warring with a nascent, almost imperceptible curiosity. He was accustomed to loud, decisive answers, not quiet, unsettling questions that dismantled core assumptions. He had always associated intelligence with fast talkers, confident opinions, and loud certainty. But here, in the heart of the crisis, a different kind of intelligence, quiet and subtle, was quietly dismantling everything they thought they knew. The chaos continued to hum, but a new, unsettling silence had begun to settle around Anya's words, a quiet current that threatened to unravel the loud certainties of the last few hours. The skeptical glances were still there, but now mixed with a nascent, almost imperceptible sliver of doubt, a question hanging in the stale air. What if she was right? The stale air in the conference room seemed to hum with an unspoken question, a nascent, almost imperceptible sliver of doubt that had finally begun to settle around Anya's quiet words, threatening to unravel the loud certainties of the last few hours. The skeptical glances still lingered, but now mixed with a flicker of something new. What if she was right? Victor, usually an unmovable force of confident pronouncements, leaned back, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Sarah, whose analytical mind typically saw every angle, stared at the whiteboard, its surface a chaotic tapestry of discarded ideas and unyielding numbers. The critical decision for their next project, a complex resource allocation problem, remained a Gordian knot, tighter than ever despite the hours of fervent debate. Every solution proposed had been met with a confident counterargument. Every path explored had led to another impasse, reinforcing the very conflict they sought to resolve. The collective energy in the room had devolved from vibrant discussion to a palpable tension, a shared frustration that was beginning to border on exhaustion. It was in this moment of deep stagnation, when the loudest voices had finally exhausted their repertoire of logical assaults and impassioned defenses, that Anya, who had mostly remained a listener, her posture attentive but reserved, finally shifted. Her gaze, which had thoughtfully swept across each face, absorbing not just the words but the subtle tells of stress, ambition, and weariness, now settled. She had spent the last hour not formulating her own arguments, but mapping the room, observing the dynamics, who held influence, who sought approval with every contribution, who meticulously avoided any hint of conflict. She saw the underlying currents, the emotional triggers beneath the logical veneer, the status games played out in subtle shifts of tone and eye contact. Only now, after fully understanding the intricate web of individual motivations and the collective mental framework, did she decide to speak. Her voice, when it came, was soft, a quiet current that nonetheless cut through the lingering echoes of frustrated authority. "If I may," she began, the simple phrase a gentle invitation rather than a demand for attention. "I've been listening intently to everyone's perspectives, and there's a profound amount of expertise and passion in this room."
But perhaps, she paused, allowing her words to land without haste, we are optimizing for the wrong variable entirely.
The words hung in the air, not as a challenge, but as an almost disarmingly simple observation. Victor's head snapped up, a flash of irritation in his eyes, but Anya continued before he could articulate a defense.
What problem, she asked, her gaze meeting his without confrontation, are we actually solving here? Are we trying to maximize immediate output for the next quarter? Or are we aiming for sustainable growth and market penetration over the next 5 years, even if it means a slower ramp-up? The question, so fundamental it felt obvious, had nevertheless eluded everyone in their rush to find a solution within the existing frame. Most people build inside the box. Anya had simply asked them to look at the box itself. Another silence descended, different from the tense quiet before.
This one was contemplative, a space for thought rather than a vacuum to be filled. Sarah, who had been meticulously outlining a new set of metrics, slowly lowered her pen.
A ripple went through the room. A few people exchanged uncertain glances. Others leaned forward, their expressions shifting from frustration to dawning introspection.
Victor, usually quick to defend his initial stance, rubbed his temples, his usual confidence momentarily eclipsed by genuine thought.
We've always prioritized immediate output, he admitted, the words coming out slowly, carefully. It's the pressure from the board, the market expectations. But you're right, Anya. The CEO's long-term vision has always been about sustainable growth. We haven't explicitly factored that into this specific decision. We kept trying to hit the immediate target. It was a remarkable shift, and admission of a potential oversight without defensiveness, a quiet acknowledgement that the model they were working with needed an update.
Sarah nodded in agreement, a rare softening around her usually sharp eyes. If sustainable growth is indeed the true primary objective, then our current resource allocation proposals are entirely off base.
We're prioritizing short-term gains over long-term stability, just as Anya pointed out. My entire analysis, while technically sound, was built on the wrong premise.
Anya didn't press her advantage. She didn't offer a triumphant smirk or a knowing glance. Her goal wasn't to win an argument, but to locate accuracy.
So, if we reframe our objective to sustainable growth, she continued, her voice still calm, still guiding, what new constraints or opportunities emerge? What factors become more critical, and which, while still important, become less dominant in our calculations? She was inviting them to rebuild, to refine their understanding, not to simply adopt hers. She had observed the human tendency to cling to familiar frameworks, the ego invested in being right. But she also understood the collective relief that came when a truly simpler, clearer truth surfaced. The resistance that had simmered just moments before dissipated, replaced by a collaborative energy. Suddenly, the arguments shifted from "my idea is better than yours" to "how do we collectively build the most accurate model?"
Underneath the sudden and refreshing clarity, Anya remained composed, her steady presence a stark contrast to the escalating urgency that had previously gripped the room.
Her ability to maintain a clear gap between the stimulus of high pressure and her calibrated response allowed her to think through the problem, not inside it. While others felt the tightening grip of deadlines and expectations, her mind remained expansive, unclouded by the emotional surge of anxiety. It was this composure, this almost uncanny clarity under fire, that had allowed her to see beyond the immediate chaos and identify the fundamental flaw in their collective approach. From that point, the discussion transformed. New ideas, previously dismissed because they didn't fit the immediate output paradigm, now found their champions. Victor, energized by the new direction, started mapping out potential long-term benefits with Sarah, whose analytical prowess, now redirected, found new and more pertinent data points. The quiet question Anya had posed had, in essence, unlocked the room, allowing the group to step out of a mental cul-de-sac and onto a wide, open road. The decision, once a source of bitter contention, began to coalesce, built on a foundation of genuine understanding and shared purpose, rather than assumed certainty. Anya's subtle intervention wasn't about being the loudest voice or the quickest to offer a solution. It was about being the most perceptive, the most curious, the one who sought precision over performance. Her intelligence didn't announce itself with a flourish. It revealed itself in the stillness she brought, in the space she created for clarity to emerge. It demonstrated unequivocally that real intelligence rarely announces itself with volume or speed or constant proof. It appears instead in the quiet restraint to observe, in the humble curiosity to question assumptions, and in the meticulous precision of a mind that prioritizes accuracy over pride. So if you ever find yourself in a room where the loudest voices are struggling, and you encounter someone who listens more than they speak, who updates their beliefs without ego, and who maintains a quiet calm when others escalate, remember Anya's example. You're likely looking at a mind far sharper and far more effective than it seems.